Welcome to the Technicality podcast with Joe and Yao and Jordan Boyd. The podcast is about to begin. Smash that like and subscribe button, yo.
Are we live? Oh my gosh.
All right.
Welcome everyone to Technicality. My name is Jordan Boyd. This is Joanne Yao.
Hello.
And together we are Tech and Nicality. Legal advice from Joanne over here. She's a lawyer.
And tech advice from Jordan, being the head of tech.
Founder of a tech company. And first of all, how was your day today? What did you get up to?
Well, first of all, it is Chinese New Year, so Chinese New Year's Eve.
Eve, yeah.
Happy
Chinese
New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Drink to that.
Oh, cheers.
Year of the
Thank
pig.
you.
So,
Well,
besides freezing, because it's so cold out,
God, it is cold. So cold.
I'm preparing to bring in the Lunar New Year. And yourself, how was your day?
It was good. I took my dog to doggy daycare today.
Oh,
It was her first day at doggy daycare. I felt like a child dropping them off at school in the first grade.
was it harder for you than it was for her?
I mean, at first, and then I quickly just was happy to not have to worry about my dog all day. But I felt a little bad at first. But then, so the crazy thing is they have an app, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can watch your dog on a live camera. And I was just like, wow, that's...
Human
Kinda
daycare
cool.
has that too.
But then
Yeah.
I'm watching it. I keep pulling it up throughout the day, you know, and I'm watching her, like, be bullied by other dogs and kind of getting mad. Like, I'm going to call the place and be super mad, but I didn't. And then I'm, like, watching this girl kind of, like, mopping and stuff. And I was thinking, you know, I would be a little creeped out knowing that people can just watch me all day
Yeah.
on a Nest camera. Like, that's... I don't know. For me, I wouldn't love that.
Well, I have a different perspective
Okay.
on that because I have a human baby, unlike your fur baby.
Yeah.
But when she was in preschool, they also had live cam. And of course, the tech lawyer in me is thinking the employment issues, the HR issues, the privacy issues. However, here's where I think it's a good idea because if the people working at the daycare are doing the job that they're supposed to, why wouldn't they want everyone to be able to check in? And I mean, like you, parents are a little neurotic and they kind of helicopter over their parents. And if they think, well, how's little Timmy doing today? And you log in and say, oh, he's actually fine. Then the parent can log off and kind of go about their day.
What about, do the kids have to give their permission to be on your live feed?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It's because I can watch everyone else's kid,
Yeah.
right? Well, the parents give consent. I mean, you kind of know when you sign up for the daycare that, you know, mommy can watch, but everyone else's mommy and daddy can watch. So it's just incumbent on the parents to tell little Timmy when you go to daycare, don't be a jerk because everyone's going to see that you're a jerk.
They're going to catch you on camera.
Did you tell your dog that? I hope you did.
I did. And I was like, I don't want other people looking at my dog, you know? So I was a little uncomfortable with it. I didn't give consent for her to be on other people's Nest cameras. And so just saying, we might have a lawsuit there.
Well, I will write a strongly worded letter on your behalf if there are
Perfect.
any issues. That's the Nicality part of Technicality.
Yeah, you are the Nicality. So there's a few topics we chose for today.
Yeah.
The first being this ginormous divorce thing going on with Jeff Bezos and his wife of
Yeah, that's a little one, isn't it?
25 years.
Right.
That's a long time.
It is. So, you know, I'm sure that they were together through thick and thin, and probably during the thin, they were ready for success together. And in the eventuality of their split, maybe they thought of what they were going to do with all their wealths, or maybe they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would have been hard for him to predict, I think, the success of an online bookstore turning into, you know, the world's largest place to order anything you possibly want. But I mean, there must have been some signs. So I think we kind of differ on this a little bit, because if it were me and I'd built a fortune of $120 billion, I'm not sure I would want to give away half of it. I know it's the law, but I think
Sure.
there's some gray areas there that I'm curious about. But I know you think a little differently than I do.
Yeah,
on this.
besides the fact that I was going to punch you in the face off camera because of your opinion that differed so much from mine. And by the way, for all the listeners out there, I would never physically assault Mr. Boyd. So I just thought
I'm
going to
edit that out so that you.
I'll talk to post-production and write them a letter too. But so my perspective, and I think probably the legal perspective on this, is number one, first of all, don't take legal advice from a podcast. Second of all, every state's going to have their different laws pertaining to divorces. In California tends to be one of the squirrely states that has just a little bit of a different way of treating things when it comes to their laws. So in my perspective, regardless of what state you're in, if you've been married for 25 years, she obviously played some role in his life that helped him contribute to the success that he was. And if we take a look at, I want to say it was a joint Twitter, or maybe it was just Bezos' personal Twitter, when he addressed the public to say, listen, we've been married for 25 years.
The joint statement they put out.
Yeah, it was very amicable. To what extent it was
a
PR
both
thing.
Released it at the same time.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that there's animosity or hostility, and I don't get the sense that he has any issue with.
Okay, but and here's my thing with this. So how much money is enough money? I mean, 120, let's say, who knows, it fluctuates, right? But $120 billion.
Right.
How many billions does it take to, I think this is such a different case than just any other divorce case where someone's got, I don't know what, $1 million in assets. We're talking $120 billion.
Sure.
Where the IP came from his brain.
So why, let me ask this, and why is a high stakes divorce any different from the regular Joe and Jane down the street divorce, where their marriage can have assets split 50-50? There is, in my opinion, no difference. Why should the wealthy be treated any different than the average layperson?
I think for me, it's that's so much money. Like how many billions does a person need to be fair, right? And I would say too, if I were him, and I foresaw what was going to happen with my business, I would probably have done a post-nup knowing the largeness of what's about to happen. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know if they've figured out. I know they said there was no prenup. Right. And I know they said with the laws there, the state laws they have, it's definitely a split 50-50. But I think there's nuances to that 50-50 nature, right? That, for example, if she was an awful person the entire time, I doubt she was, but if she was a terrible spouse or whatever,
right,
that could, there's factors to this, is there not? That you can factor in that she was, or he was terrible. You said something about his, texts came out.
Right, from his alleged mistress that were leaked from her brother, allegedly. But, all those things aside, and you bring up 2 points. Number one is the post-nup. And number two is essentially the conduct of the parties. So far be it from me to really discuss the esoterics of family law, because I don't do family law. But if we were to break down a post-nup into what essentially is, it's essentially a contract. Right. That once you get married, if you want then somebody else to agree to an enforceable contract, there's got to be some kind of give and take. So the law school aspect of it is there's an offer that's accepted, and there's consideration. Consideration's right. A fancy word just for there's an exchange of something of value. So let's say if Bezos said to his wife at the time, listen, we are 15 years in, let's draft a post-nup so that I can take the lion's share of this wealth, and you will still get a very healthy, settlement. She can certainly say, well, sure, I will agree to that, but there's got to be some incentive for her to agree to that, because if she says, no, I don't agree to that, she's already then giving up a legal right she has to proceed through a divorce without any prenup, postnup, what have you. So there's got to be some incentive for her to then agree to that, and that typically entails some kind of payment. And those are probably also going to be confidential. So it's very possible that there may have been some kind of post-nup that we are not privy to. So just because the media says, well, it's 50-50 and that's all there is to it, there could be more behind the scenes.
How can they figure out if he had a prenup, though? not a post-nup. Is it more confidential?
Yeah, it's more about what the parties want to disclose to each other and to the public.
Right.
I think
Because they have to voluntarily agree to it. So if she looks at it and says, no, this is like, no, I'm not going to do this, then it has to be from both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there was an interesting article as we were talking about putting our inaugural episode together. So I Googled the latest in the divorce, and there was this article that I saw. It was published by hacked.com, and it was published yesterday, so February 2nd, 2019. And it asked this hypothetical question about whether Bitcoin could have saved Amazon's Jeff Bezos $70 billion. And
he could have laundered it into Bitcoin.
well, that was the argument. And I
it's
thought, well, that's
not-
an interesting, that's an interesting question, which is a tech question on top of a tech question.
Sure.
So I have to first say that this article was a bit of a teaser because it really doesn't answer the question, but it does talk about the theory of spouses hiding assets from each other. And the way that they're doing it now under current laws with Bitcoin is that they are hiding their money through various untraceable cryptocurrencies.
Sure.
But then the spin that Hacked put on it, which I thought was interesting, and I don't know what authority they have behind it, but they essentially said that if Jeff Bezos put his $140 billion into cryptocurrency, that's not even a consideration he could think about because there isn't even that much Bitcoin available
Yeah.
in circulation. And then it went further to say that even if he wanted to hide half of that, so whatever she was entitled to, there's not even enough Bitcoin to cover her
half,
70
yeah.
billion.
It's also like a horribly volatile
Right.
currency that, I mean, I wouldn't imagine that he would hide it that way. But it's an interesting theory. And, I mean, I don't know. Would I try to launder it into Bitcoin? How do they track that right now? Who would go after him? Her lawyers would try and dig on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be difficult. You'd need very tech,
Very difficult.
brilliant. They'd have to bring on advisors. I mean,
If I could compare it
It's
to
hard.
something, if I could compare it to something that we're familiar with now, it would be similar to offshore accounts. How do we
Sure.
find out whether husbands or wives or whoever it may be, how do we find out that they're hiding money offshore? We just don't know. And sometimes I think the irony is that we ask them for honest disclosure of all their assets. I mean, if you're going to go to the lengths of hiding your money offshore, what are the chances that you're being fully honest about all
Right.
those offshore monies?
well, and in that case, you're probably more hiding from the government for tax reasons,
Right.
obviously. So it's not even about the spouse necessarily.
Well, I think one of the interesting things then to see and to watch for is, how shareholders are going to react to this. Because what if she becomes a majority shareholder? How do you have confidence in the fact that the majority shareholder in the company that you're investing in is the ex-wife?
Or both of them share the majority of the vote. I mean,
Right.
I think they would both, if they're smart, which they are, would probably recognize that they control a large part of not just the tech world, but society as a whole. It would make sense that they would be amicable about it, and make sure that they don't affect the stock price, which would affect both of their lives moving forward, especially if she gets half of what he's worth. But the crazy thing for me was that they would immediately become the third and fourth richest people in the world, I think, behind Gates and one other person. And she would become the wealthiest woman in the world instantly, just from that settlement.
Well, I'd say good for her.
That's a sweet deal for...
I think it's a fair deal. I'm going to characterize it as
I
fair.
thought about this today. Would he get half? Like, let's say she has. I think she does. She runs a part of their business, whatever.
Right.
Does he get half of what she made?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Everything gets put in a pot, and then you split it in half. In theory, that's the way
Yeah.
it's supposed to work.
Well, unfortunately, they have 5 homes, so that's awkward because someone gets 3 and someone gets 2, or I guess they sell one of them. I just can't imagine. That whole thing is just... But I agree. Will it affect the stock price? I think it already has a little bit.
I haven't even been watching, but I know that that securities lawyers are all... it's one of those funny cases where you've got securities lawyers and matrimonial lawyers all with their eye on the same case.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens very often.
Well,
at
and we
all.
talked about this, but what is the payday for a lawyer that's dealing with that settlement? I mean, that must be every lawyer's dream, that they get the Jeff Bezos divorce. You've
You know,
dreamed about this,
yeah.
haven't you, Joanne?
Well, I dream about a lot of lucrative cases, but not for personal gain or personal
of course
benefit.
not. No.
Because, and
No.
I'll say this, is that a lot of lawyers will take on high-profile cases for free, just for the
The
sake of
high-profile
saying, I
nature.
worked
Yeah.
on. No, I worked on that case.
But it's 120 billion. I mean, that's what would the payday be? I think we talked about this a little bit. Roughly.
Oh, geez.
Guessing.
And in California
guesstimating.
dollars, too. I couldn't even. And here's the
At
reason
least
why.
$1 billion.
No, I
No?
wouldn't say. $1 billion in
Hundreds
legal
of millions?
fees. I could say that it's comfortably in the six figures. But this is also in mind this is also in mind that they're coming to a relatively amicable settlement. They're not dragging through divorce courts and all that. So that's the reason why I'm not going to venture into the billions. I wouldn't do it, but
Well, that's fair.
yeah.
Either way, probably not a bad thing to be Jeff Bezos or his spouse's lawyer.
Well, as long as there's truth and disclosures, I think that they're probably proceeding about it the right way, because truth, as we know, is key, unlike some other cases we're going to discuss.
Yeah, which, brings us to this next case, which most people have probably heard about, this FYRE Festival stuff. It's all over Netflix. They have a Hulu and Netflix. I've only seen the Netflix one. Which one have you?
Well, I've only seen
seen
Netflix because
the
I
Netflix
thought
one, yeah.
Hulu was only available in the States. I used to have Hulu when I lived in the States.
It's just too many things for me to subscribe to. Side tangent, they're starting to see a rise in illegal streaming again, because there's so many streaming services that people are like, I don't want to have to pay $300 a month for like each different service. Anyways, let's pull up the clip of the FYRE Festival from Netflix, which is one we've watched.
The trailer, right?
The trailer,
Yeah.
yeah. We won't play the whole thing, but let's just play a little bit of it.
Festival the world has ever seen.
Island getaway turned disaster.
It became very barbaric.
Right now, we are the fucking laughing stock of everything.
Just wait until you see what you're getting yourselves into.
American
Yeah,
rapper,
let's leave it there. There's Ja Rule, the star of the show. Yeah, Ja Rule's taken some heat for this, for sure. And the founder, who I can't remember, what's his name? I forget.
Billy McFarland.
Yeah, he kind of looks like Seth MacFarlane. So at first I was like, is that his son? And they're just like, he doesn't want to admit it.
I know.
I don't think it's his son. But so here's from the tech side of things, okay? This started out as an app, right?
Yeah.
A FYRE app, and it was this whole company. They raised a bunch of money, and it was a really cool concept. And it was basically book anyone you want, like Bella Hadid, the model, or Maroon 5, or maybe that's a little big, but I don't know. But book people like Uber through this app.
Yes.
right?
Fantastic concept.
Really interesting concept. So
And well executed, I must say.
well executed, and this founder, this guy was kind of, I think like a lot of founders, he was hoping for the best out of something, and I think it got away from him pretty quickly, and he had the team in place, but maybe didn't listen to them enough when they were like, hey, like this is sketchy.
Yeah, in watching, and of course I'm basing my knowledge of what happened behind the scenes on the Netflix documentary. At first, I thought that it was, and before watching the documentary, my perspective was, well, he was probably this up-and-coming socialite entrepreneur that everybody wanted to be a part of, and that he was just surrounded with yes men. Because I see this all the time, is that when there's a rising star, everybody wants a piece of it, and they will not tell this person what they need to hear. But that's not exactly the spin that I got after watching the documentary, where everybody was telling him, listen, there's a problem with X, there's a problem with Y, there's a problem with Z, and we need to fix it.
Yeah.
Yes. And he essentially went into denial and said, well, that's great. Let's keep throwing the party. And they said, well, there is no party.
Which is kind of an entrepreneur's mindset, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they
true.
really try to, you try to block out the people that say this isn't possible, because you're trying to do something that most people think is impossible. And
Sure.
what he was trying to do, turned out it was impossible. And, he defrauded people out of their money, and it's unfortunate. But if you think about the concept, and it was very similar to Woodstock, right? I mean, he wanted to have this kind of Woodstock moment. I mean, but the one that, like, the thing in the documentary that stood out to me, the first one was calling it Pablo Escobar's Island. And he was like strictly told, like, just don't use Pablo Escobar's name when you're promoting it. And then he puts out this viral video, gets all of these massive influencers, like the biggest influencers. I think he paid like $1.2 million to an agency for a few of the big influencers. I think he paid Kylie Jenner like $275,000 or $250,000 US for one post.
Right.
And he named it Pablo Escobar's Island, and it just started this just bad snowball effect.
It was so
stuff.
brazen, you know, of all the
ballsy.
things that, and I think that is, despite how successful he had been before with, you know, that, I think it was called Magnesium, that membership that he had, despite the successes that he's had, and you know, that's, I mean, to his credit, there are some pretty good projects that he's launched, but I think his inability to understand what it was going to take to throw this kind of a party, and really when it comes down to his obligation to be responsible with the funds that he's raising, that's what separated him from the real big fish. Like, he was selling himself as, I am the real deal. But the way he was acting, the way he was treating, the way he executed it, he really demonstrated that he's just a small fish with not a lot of sophistication when it comes to pulling off what he's promising.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize, though, I feel, is that when you raise money from people, right, they sign a document that says, like, basically anything but fraud happens, and you lose this money, I forgo any right to do anything about it, basically, right? You sign like 9 signature here, initial here, initial here, initial here. So had he just screwed up, right? Had he just had this brilliant idea that was really cool, was a great concept, phenomenal marketing. I mean, for a marketer, he crushed it. I mean, he sold out in 48 hours, all the tickets, and some of the tickets were like $25,000, $100,000 ticket, you know, crazy packages. Had he just not committed fraud, he would have just lost some money. People would have been like, you know, let's move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's like he committed fraud along the way. That's where it got sketchy.
Right. And I think also, again, going back to how brazen he was every step along the way when he could have been forthcoming with, okay, guys, we're canceling the party. It's a disaster. I don't think he ever could have escaped the limelight that he's in right now, but he just made it all that much worse because you've got all these people who have the wherewithal and the means to get to a party like that, and you tick off all that whole crowd. I mean, you can't, I don't even know what he was expecting. I don't know what he thought. Did he just think that they'd say, oh, well, you know, I guess that's life. There's parties, and then there's some that just don't take off.
I think that some entrepreneurs get blinded by this kind of unrealistic view of what's about to happen because they think it's possible. They think that what they're doing, maybe it is possible, and so they're blinded by this delusion that no, maybe we can pull it together, you know, and I think it's hard sometimes to pull those people out of that and say like, no. It's really not possible because again, you're balancing as a founder. You're balancing this thin line between people saying you shouldn't do that or it's not possible with your ability to make things happen. Yeah. Right. So it's this fine line. And I think it was past the line, and maybe he didn't have the wherewithal to say. And I think there's ego involved. There's, you know, you've got big investors. I mean, he had some very big investors. I think it's hard to pull back and admit to defeat. And I see that a lot in the tech world. I see a lot of founders wait too long and then get defeated, and it looks terrible because they should have pulled the plug like 6 months ago or 3 months ago. They should have said, look, this is not going to work. Right. We need to try and sell this and scrounge up any money we can for the people who put in their money, for the investors that put in their money. Right. I mean, and he just kind of took it a little far, but the concept was brilliant in a way. I mean, that's I think the sad part for me in the tech world as a founder. For me, it's like I get that, you know, I get that having a vision and people being like, this is impossible, and you trying to balance that and say, no, it is possible, you know, like, and do something that everyone. Because imagine if he'd pulled it off.
Oh yeah, that would have been monumental. Monumental.
So yeah, take that for example. If he pulled it off, he would have gone down in history as like one of the greatest, guys, entrepreneurs, marketing success stories with the video, using influencers, which we'll get to, right?
Sure.
Because there's an issue there. So it could have been the greatest sort of pull off of all time.
Right.
But besides the point, he committed fraud. He's going to do, I think, probably 10 years. I mean, that's what they say, 10 years in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you it'll be like a year. He'll be in rich person prison. And then he'll come out and he'll be an entrepreneur again. Those guys find a way to make money because I think the brilliance behind the concept was there.
I don't disagree with the fact that whatever time he's got, and the reports I was reading was he's doing 6 years, but I mean, for whatever
there's a lot of ways
the nuance, right? Yeah. Is that regardless of whether he's in there for a year or 20, he's going to find a way to rise to the top again, financially, some way. But I think also part of, and I hate to be the naysayer on the people who are investors in this, is that I think investors were also a little too eager to get on board with what FYRE Festival was going to be, because I don't think they held him accountable for anything. They really just said, what's that brand? We like that brand. We want to write a check so we can be part of it. I mean, as an investor, would you really sign over money if you don't see that there's events like this happening in phases? If we're going to see phase 1 is the planning aspect. Phase 2 is consulting with experts. I mean, part of that documentary too, they talked about the fact that there were people in the music industry, and what they do for a living is they put on
big events.
Big events,
big festivals,
concerts. Yeah. And they saw it right from the get-go that how is this guy new to the scene, never done this before, how is he going to throw off this music festival of epic proportions? Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think too that if there were some kind of phases of accountability, I think there could have been they could have minimized their losses. But again, I hate trampling on the victims. No.
Part of investor due diligence, I would say, is who's your advisory board, right? I mean,
sure.
The guy, McFarlane clearly wasn't event. He had no industry expertise in that field.
Right.
So if I'm an investor, I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, who do you have? Do you have the guy who runs Burning Man every year? Or do you have the guy who, or the person who, So I completely agree with you. You have to do your due diligence, right? So, but what came out of this all? This was at a time when you did not have to say that you're advertising for something on Instagram, on Facebook, on these platforms, right?
Yeah.
That's a massive problem.
Right.
Right, and now we see it, right? YouTube actually includes it as there's a little tag on it on YouTube that says this, sponsored content, whatever. And Instagram, you have to put hashtag ad, like they're getting a lot tighter with it. If you want to put an ad on Facebook or Instagram, you have to acknowledge to them that you're advertising for a company. So now my understanding is, and we've seen a few of these already, they're subpoenaing influencers to basically ask them about the money because they're trying to recoup it for, I hope it's for the people that bought the tickets. My guess is it's for the wealthy people that invested in it, but I don't know. You tell me who does that money go to?
Well, and that's another interesting thing too, because I think the media has been putting a bit of an inaccurate spin on this, and maybe prematurely spinning the responsibility. And I'm just going to say the models, because that's what all the media articles are about.
I think we have a clip. Let's pull up the clip, because you're right. It's very focused on the models.
Now to that new fallout over the FYRE Festival. Kendall Jenner and Bella Hadid facing new questions this morning about how much they were paid to promote the failed event. A judge now demanding answers. Paula Ferris here with the details. Good morning, Paula.
Good morning, George. Good morning, everyone. The models appeared in a slick promotional video. They were sipping cocktails, racing around the island on private boats. They're believed to be a large reason why the festival was able to sell so many tickets.
All right, let's pause there. She's showing them driving into all that horrible. They used hurricane tents. I mean, it was just.
Right. So.
Oof, it's a nightmare.
So I wanted to dispel two myths that I'm seeing just by doing a Google search is, number one, the suggestion that these subpoenas that the models are getting will somehow result in money back in investors' pockets or the concert goers' pockets. Because what a subpoena actually is, it's that they are telling people, hey, you have information that's going to help flush out the issues in a lawsuit. And so right now, from my understanding, these subpoenas are issued as part of the bankruptcy proceedings. And the subpoena is essentially asking these models, okay, how much money were you paid?
Right.
And not necessarily how did you earn it, but the point is to trace where did all the money go. Because in bankruptcy proceedings, essentially, the money has disappeared into thin air. And these proceedings are trying to trace back where did all the money go to see what was fraud and what was legitimate expenses.
So it has nothing to do with getting the money back?
Not at this phase.
Wow.
Right. But it could lead into other things because whatever information is disclosed, that's where it could spin off into what you were then talking about in your second point as to these influencers and the use of hashtag ad. And all these disclosures you'll see on YouTube, on Instagram. So I did a little digging here because I wanted to, even though this is an American issue, I wanted to give our Canadian audience the benefit of the equivalent. And I was pleasantly surprised that I found a pretty nice fit. So in the States, the regulatory body for this type of disclosure is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And they've published these endorsement guides. And it's not the best read, but it's not the worst either. There's a pretty decent, if I could say, 12-page synopsis, which this endorsement guide is. And they give some pretty nice examples as far as what kinds of disclosures you have to do. But
does it seem like they understand the magnitude, though, of like what these people, the control that these people have over society?
I think they do.
Okay.
To give them credit. Now, it's not the best guideline because everything is very fact specific. But again, the law is also very fact specific. So the spirit of these endorsement guidelines is that they want to have the objective of preventing deceptive advertising practices. Okay, so they just want at the heart of it for whoever the endorser is to disclose what their relationship is with that advertiser. So it doesn't have to be hashtag ad, but that's the popular one because it's so short. And if you're using Twitter, the shorter the better. It could be something like hashtag, what else did they have? They had a hashtag ambassador, hashtag sponsored. Ambassador.
That's sneaky.
Ambassador?
I mean, do you think all American people know what an ambassador is?
Well, and that's a good point. That's an excellent point
That's
because
what I'm saying, right? Do they get the magnitude of this stuff? I mean,
that's the thing is that even when they put hashtag ad, it's best if they put it at the guidelines are saying it's best if you put it at the beginning.
Yeah.
But you don't have to.
You
You could put it at the end. But really, the more forthcoming and the more clear it is that you're making this relationship of a paid endorsement clear, that's what the FTC is looking for. So the Canadian side of that, and really I compared the language just to see how close they are as far as the spirit, and they do come pretty close. So the Canadian side of it is it's the Competition Bureau of Canada, and they've got... And now we know. I don't think, and that's the thing is the coverage we get is typically American.
Totally.
We don't get a whole lot of Canadian stuff. And
of course.
I mean, for what it's worth, I like the fact that they mirror each other because of all the commerce that we do. I mean, if you're doing business in the States, chances are, if you got a website, Canadians are going to be surfing it too. So
these influencers are followed by people around the world.
Absolutely.
That's the other tricky thing, right? It's not just American people following these people, right?
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So essentially the Competition Bureau has very similar, if not almost identical, recommendations that you just prevent deceptive trade practices and deceptive advertising by disclosing what your relationship is. And they go into various examples, like what if you get free products? Well, what if you get a benefit after the ad goes out? You don't get it on the front end. So they do go through various examples, and I think it's relatively thorough. I mean, for the people that I talk to and advise as far as what disclosures they need to do, I think these examples that they have capture the spirit of this pretty well.
And I would say that this event triggered a lot of this stuff. I mean,
Right.
because it's the true example. And I mean, I've seen it for years now where I've thought, I mean, these people are using these products and they're kind of saying, you know, this is my favorite thing. And you're like, is it? Or, you know, like clearly you're being paid for this. And you see it a lot on podcasts. You see a lot on podcasts, and these podcasters are, yeah, you know, I love using blah, blah, blah. And they like, I mean, again, I don't even know on a podcast. I guess it's obvious because you're saying it at the beginning of the podcast, and you can kind of fast forward through it if you want, right? But they're still kind of, it's a tricky area, I would say. And I think we're going to see a lot more. I think Facebook and Instagram and other social networks, YouTube is working on tools for making this more obvious, as they're making tools to make it more obvious that you're reading something from something funded by the Russian government, or funded by the U.S. government, or funded by the Canadian government, so that it's more transparent, right? So I think that's happening. Can I just say, from a marketing perspective, if I'm Kylie Jenner, right? Yeah. I think she's worth $1 billion now because of her cosmetic stuff, like makeup or whatever. Yeah. If it were me, and I had that much money, I had $1 billion, right? 999 million. I would probably just be like, how much did these people spend on these tickets? Mm-hmm. I'd ball out and I'd give them all their money back. How much would it be real? I mean, how much of a dent is it going to make? I don't think it would make a dent in their pocket.
Excellent point. That I think that somebody here with deep pockets,
I'm just saying,
can
Kylie,
really come out smelling like roses.
She's definitely not going to watch this podcast. But if it were me and I had $1 billion and I could spend, I don't know, $1 million? What? It can't have been that much money, okay? Maybe, 5 million max. Right. And I can just 5 million. All these people, oh my God, Kylie Jenner gave me my money back. Just saying. Marketing opportunity. Yes. Jump on it, Kylie.
And that plug was not in any way affiliated with Kylie Jenner. But if she wants to talk to Mr. Boyd, she can contact me.
100%. So on this trend of sort of young founders that have brilliant ideas and are trying to change the way people look at the world and do things in a different way, let's talk about this Theranos thing.
Yes.
Okay, this Theranos stuff.
I bought into that when it first came out.
It's crazy. I mean, I'd heard about it, and then I started to dig a little deeper, and she was like obsessed with Steve Jobs. I'm kind of obsessed with Steve Jobs. I own Steve Jobs' actual Christian Dior terry cloth bathrobe.
Also a plug not endorsed.
Not endorsed. By. I actually own that, and you can Google Steve Jobs bathrobe. It'll come up. I own that. It's brown. Sometimes I wear it. Don't judge me. I brainstorm in it.
I have judged you prior to this disclosure anyway. So. And
I'm always, when I wear it, I'm like, I wonder if he like farted in this. I wonder, you know, like, I don't know. I'm like curious, you know, what did he do? Did he always walk around nude in it? You know, I don't want to be risque about it, but just saying, there's some, you know, some heritage to that thing.
Right.
I also got 2 of his razors, which is also weird, right? 2 of his electric shavers.
Yeah. Wow.
But in my mind, I'm like, okay, DNA, you can build people from DNA. I might have Steve Jobs' hair, everyone. Okay.
You might.
So
that's a gross thought.
Y'all might be calling me up.
There's value in that. I mean, you've certainly.
I'm just saying, I might be able to clone Steve Jobs. But anyways, Theranos. Okay.
Yeah.
Little background here. This young lady, I can't remember her name. She basically was this kind of Steve Jobs type figure, and she idolized him. I guess she would wear the turtlenecks, like she'd lower her voice when she talked. And there's
conspiracy. That for real? I didn't know
there's
that.
Conspiracy theories on YouTube that have clips of her being like, ha! And then she like realizes, and she's like, oh, I didn't mean to get my voice higher there. She doesn't say that, but you know what I mean. So there's theories because there's theories that when women have a lower voice, they're more
authoritative.
Authoritative. Yeah. Anyways, might be a conspiracy there. But the whole thing sounds like, so basically what she claimed to have figured out was from a finger prick, right? Just like how you test your blood sugar for diabetes, right? A little finger prick.
Right.
From a finger prick, you can collect enough blood to run a gamut of tests, right? And tests that people use to determine stuff like cancer and life-altering, Elizabeth Holmes, that's her name. And she is similar to McFarlane in this belief that she's changing the world. And, you know, you look at YouTube clips and I think it's like 4 to 6 years ago. She's everywhere. She's at TechCrunch, Recode. Like, she's doing all these different podcast
and
things.
Very charismatic.
Oh.
You know, very charming. And, you know, really,
And
that
a
was one of
vision.
those. Yes, absolutely.
A cool vision.
But again, overplayed the fake it till you make it.
Yeah. And so what basically happened was they created these machines. They had a ton of experts working with them. They
Right.
created these machines. The machines didn't work. So basically these tests would come out and they'd measure them against these other like kind of industry standard machines. And they would be off by very large numbers. A lot.
Yeah.
And so what was happening was they were going to her and being like, hey, just like FYRE Festival, right? Hey, like these aren't working, you know? Like, hey, we can't throw this festival. These machines are not accurate. And she would just be like, yep, just keep running the tests.
Yeah.
And they're sending parents, people with serious things, children with diseases. They were giving them results. There was one I saw where this guy got the doctor called him, was like, yeah, you tested positive for this crazy like cancer or something.
Yes.
And then called him like 2 weeks later because it was so extreme. They're like, yeah, you know, take another test like in this other lab. And he called him back and he said, you don't actually have it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I
that's
think
how wrong they were.
I think there's two levels of sinister here.
Yeah.
One of them is what you're talking about, because we're not just talking about duping people about a concert.
Money, yeah.
Yeah, we're
It's
duping
just
people
money.
about their health
Yeah, that's
and their health
next level
conditions.
sketchy.
But then also, as far as the investor side of it, my understanding from a couple YouTube clips that I saw was that she was essentially using other companies' technology to deliver more accurate results and selling it as Theranos results. That is the second level of sinister that I don't even know how you get around either level, much less both of them together.
Yeah, well, and now I think she returned an amount. It was like 8.9 million. It was some kind of amount of money. I think we might have another clip here of just the beginnings of what happened here. Good old SEC coming at you.
News on Theranos. The SEC is charging Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes and former Theranos president Sunny Balwani with raising more than $700 million from investors through an elaborate years-long fraud. They're saying that they exaggerated or made false statements about the company's technology, business, and financial performance. Theranos and Holmes, the SEC says, have agreed to resolve the charges against them. They're stripping her of control of the company. She is going to pay a $500,000 penalty and be barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company for 10 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this was when is this? March, right? So it's transpired a lot more now. I think she's facing jail time as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because she basically led them to believe, all this stuff. She raised $700 million of funding. That's insane to think about.
Right.
Right? I mean, her net worth, it was skyrocketing. She was worth $9 billion or something based on the company's worth. It's like, what? Anyone who's in business is aware. You sign documents all the time. You work with lawyers all the time. You sign things that are like, you cannot lie about what your company is doing, or you are liable for you're personally liable for fraud, right?
Sure.
How do these people not know that what's going to happen to
Well,
them?
again, I think going back to the FYRE Festival there's a lot of excitement around, number one, tech, and number two, tech that involves healthcare and
It's
medical,
popular space.
right?
Yep.
So, I think this is also a popular mentality of a lot of investors who want to be on the forefront and say, I got in at the ground level, and they kind of forego the due diligence aspect to at least have the ego boosting factor and the bragging rights to say, well, I was there from day one. Because really, realistically, how long is disclosure really going to take? And number two, even if you got it, and I'm not privy to that disclosure information, but what if they were fed a load of garbage right from
Which I think happens a lot in the
Yeah.
tech world, right? They inflate numbers. They inflate statistics about their machines. Like, that's part of the whole raising money thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I guess that's the word of caution is.
Now, here's the other big one. So the investors is one, right?
Yeah.
All the people, would there not be lawsuits from all the people that had bad results? Or died potentially from not dealing with something that they got tested for and said it was negative?
I think potentially there could
Class
be.
action?
I mean, I'm not aware of any of them, but
Yeah.
I would think that if in the case where somebody should have been diagnosed with something that was treatable,
Right.
but the Theranos results missed it, and they missed a window of opportunity to treat it or catch it at the early stage, and it resulted in death or paralysis, anything
bad,
else.
yeah.
Right. I would think that certainly would. I mean, that's kind of the crux of medical malpractice. That's just irresponsible diagnostics.
Here's the other one. And I don't know, again, I mean, I don't know, would they be liable? So Walgreens was the one that took on these tests and were
Right.
administering them like all the Walgreens were doing it.
Yeah.
Is Walgreens liable?
Well, I think that would depend on what did Walgreens.
What were they told?
No, yeah. I mean, how much fault
Yeah.
would Walgreens be in if they're given
they should
all
do
these?
due diligence on a health test, a blood test. I mean, you'd think.
Oh, I agree. But
That's
again, if they're
risky
fed
business.
statements that aren't true, it's really the difference between
true.
did they choose willful blindness,
Right.
or would they fed just a load of garbage and they relied on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. At the end of the day, it just comes down to this whole, the balance between, a vision for something
Right.
that's completely radical that a lot of people, a majority of people you talk to are going to say that's not possible.
Yeah.
And the realistic nature of something not being possible.
Right. Well, and I think this also
Where's the line,
circles.
right?
This also circles back to a point that you made about the models just taking this to be a PR opportunity to get out of the scorched earth aspect
Or the modeling
of,
agency.
Right,
They did absolutely
just
no
by
due
paying it
diligence.
out.
Yep.
But let's talk about the way Ja Rule has really kind of he's skirted under the radar for the most part. From my understanding, he's settled privately. I don't know to what extent that Elizabeth Holmes could have settled a lot of issues privately.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to the effect that she has an obligation and a responsibility to fair disclosures. I don't know if you can settle your way out of that, but
Yeah, I think as the president, it's, Ja Rule can say, oh, I was misled and duped and, whatever.
yeah,
If you're the president,
yeah,
you're screwed, right? I mean, the other one that comes to mind is the guy who jacked the price up on the drugs for life-saving drugs for cancer, whatever. Martin Shkreli, who I think is actually a fascinating human being. I've seen him live stream. The guy seems like he's a brilliant guy.
yeah.
As I'm sure these other two people are brilliant people. And similar thing, I mean, because he was the president. And here's the other thing. When you have the media's attention or influencers involved, I mean, would this have happened? I mean, think about all the Wall Street stuff that's gone on, right?
Yeah.
How much money they've scammed from people and lost for people and no accountability, right?
Right.
But as soon as for Shkreli, he bought this one-off album from Wu-Tang Clan. He owns the only copy. I think the government owns it now because they took everything that he owned. But as soon as you draw the media's eye,
Yeah.
now you better be careful. You better be even more careful
Right.
than if you're just some big
When you
wig.
summon the demon,
Yeah,
you have to be careful what you say.
Oh yeah, because now there's this culture angle to it of
Right.
people want to take you down.
Sure.
People want to see you because you're mean and you're evil. If you're hosting a festival, right? People are going to tweet about it.
Oh yeah.
I would guess his audience is millennials, right? They talk about it on all the news clips. If you're giving people blood tests that affect their health, people are probably going to tweet about it.
Right.
Right? Amongst other things. So it's I just wonder sometimes with these cases, if they were less in the limelight, would they be in as much trouble? I don't think they would.
I don't know. Again, the limelight and what disclosures happen behind closed doors, I still think those are two very different contexts.
True.
So, one of them being what your forte is how do we explain to the public the value of our product and our service and our company, what
Without
we promise
lying.
you, right? To what I do, which is the due diligence and compliance and the paperwork side of it. It almost has to be a happy marriage of it, I think. I don't think you can have one without the other, because no matter how, in my opinion, no matter how wonderful an idea you have, if people don't hear about it, if there's no buzz about it, it's still not going to gain any traction. So I think the success of the people who are at the helm of these big flops largely had to do with the fact that they're really, really good at getting people on board, even though they were selling nothing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Selling a dream, right?
Right.
Yeah. You know, I think more founders need friends like you who are lawyers and who can say, you know, maybe you could say that, but, you know, maybe you should, you know, and consult with them, right? Because it's clearly the delusion of, you know, like we talked about a number of things, right? It's ego. It's you know, I don't want to lose. I mean, I think people that run companies are highly competitive people. They want to win, right? Lawyers are the same. They want to win. That is a huge part of their life, and they don't want to admit to defeat. Even though when they lose, it's like, we didn't lose, you know. We just let them win, you know.
Loss is in the eye of the beholder. Come on.
Exactly.
So, and am I taking this to be a license to continue to put you in your place when you just start getting just off the wall crazy ideas that are just a little
100%.
too outrageous? Yes.
I don't want to end up in prison, and I have crazy ideas. So
you do have crazy
my back,
ideas.
Have my back. We're gonna keep doing these podcasts.
Absolutely.
Weekly, right?
Yeah.
We might talk about this Teflon issue next time. There's another Netflix documentary.
Great one. Yes.
About Teflon. There's a lot of legality around it. There's a class action, but at the end of the day, we just want to talk about interesting stuff. Hopefully, once we have more people watching, we can get ideas from people watching.
I just
of like
want
what
to
they
hear
want.
about tech.
Yes.
And
Nicalities. Yep.
Ugh.
You're the Nicality.
I'm gonna have to come up with a better name for that. Yikes.
Yeah, I
Nicality
agree.
is a little, I don't know. It's a little absurd, to say the least.
I mean, it's boring, but so is being a lawyer.
And with that, folks, that's episode 1.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks for watching. Did you already pause it? Oh, thanks for watching. Catch us hopefully weekly.
Yes.
Catch us weekly. TECHnicality. Jordan Boyd.
Joanne Yao.
The Yao Meister. Yow! As I call her when I call her on the phone. Yow! Signing off for the day.
P.S. Never give Jordan Boyd your personal cell phone number. That does not
False.
bode well for anybody.
That is not a true... Zane, cut that out at the end.
Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year. Chinese New Year.
Happy Chinese New Year.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.